Blinken looks to reassure Zelensky as he visits Ukraine. Former Kazakh Minister gets 24 years in prison for murdering wife. Russian President Putin to make state visit to China this week. Whistleblower who exposed war crimes jailed. Ongoing Brazil floods raise specter of climate migration. King Charles unveils his first portrait since coronation.
Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on Funday News. It's Thursday, May 16th, and here are your top stories. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a surprise trip to Kyiv on Tuesday, meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky as Russian forces make significant gains on the battlefield in Ukraine. Blinken's visit was the first by a Biden administration official since the long-delayed passage of U.S. supplemental funding to the war-torn country. "I have come to Ukraine with a message. You are not alone," he said during a speech at the Igor Sikorsky Kyiv Polytechnic Institute. In their meeting, Zelensky urged Blinken to provide more military support to the Ukrainian military, including additional air defense support.
Russia is pushing ahead with its new advance into northeastern Ukraine after making several major advances there over the past week. Moscow's most significant gains since Kyiv's forces recaptured Kharkiv in late summer 2022. Blinken and Zelensky discussed recent battlefield updates and the importance of newly arrived U.S. security assistance to helping repel Russian attacks, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said in a readout following the meeting. U.S. President Joe Biden signed $95 billion foreign aid package last month that includes nearly $61 billion for Ukraine, following a successful 6-month campaign by the White House to build support in a House GOP conference increasingly resistant to sending more money overseas.
A former economy minister of Kazakhstan was sentenced to 24 years in prison on Monday for murdering his wife following a widely watched trial that some saw as a litmus test of the president's promise to strengthen women's rights. Funday, 44, was found guilty of torture and murder by the court. His trial, which has been broadcast live over the past 7 weeks, has been widely regarded as an attempt by the authorities to send a message that members of the elite are no longer above the law.
President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, who replaced veteran Kazakh leader Nursultan Nazarbayev 5 years ago, has said he wants to build a fairer society including improved rights for women. The case has helped rally public support behind a law criminalizing domestic violence, which Parliament passed last month. Government data show that 1 in 6 women in Kazakhstan has experienced violence by a male partner. During the trial, Bishimbayev admitted to beating his wife, but said some of her injuries were self-inflicted. He denied torturing or planning to murder her. He served as the oil-rich nation's economy minister from May to December 2016. He was convicted of bribery in 2018 and sentenced to 10 years in prison, but walked free after less than 3 years thanks to an amnesty and parole.
Russian President Vladimir Putin will make a 2-day state visit to China this week, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said Tuesday, in the latest show of unity between the two authoritarian allies against the U.S.-led Western liberal global order. Putin will meet Chinese leader Xi Jinping during his visit starting on Thursday, the ministry said, saying the two leaders would discuss cooperation in various fields of bilateral relations, as well as international and regional issues of common concern. The Kremlin, in a statement, confirmed the trip and said Putin was going on Xi's invitation. It said that this will be Putin's first foreign trip since he was sworn in as president and began his 5th term in office.
China has backed Russia politically in the conflict in Ukraine and has continued to export machine tools and other items seen as contributing to the Russian war effort, without actually exporting weaponry. China is also a major export market for energy supplies that keep the Kremlin's coffers full. China has sought to project itself as a neutral party in the conflict, but has declared a no-limits relationship with Russia in opposition to the West. The sides have also held a series of joint military drills, and China has consistently opposed economic sanctions against Russia in response to its now 2-year-old campaign of conquest against Ukraine. The two continent-sized authoritarian states are increasingly in dispute with democracies and NATO while seek to gain influence in Africa, the Middle East, and South America.
An Australian judge sentenced a former army lord to almost 6 years in prison on Tuesday for leaking to the media classified information that exposed allegations of Australian war crimes in Afghanistan. David McBride, 60, was sentenced in a court in the capital, Canberra, to 5 years and 8 months in prison after pleading guilty to 3 charges, including theft and sharing with members of the press documents classified as secret. He had faced potential life sentence. Justice David Massop ordered McBride to serve 27 months in prison before he can be considered for release on parole.
McBride addressed his supporters as he walked his dog to the front door of the Australian Capital Territory Supreme Court to be sentenced. McBride's documents form the basis of an Australian Broadcasting Corp. 7-part television series in 2017 that contained war crime allegations including Australian Special Air Service Regiment soldiers killing unarmed Afghan men and children in 2013. An Australian military report released in 2020 found evidence that Australian troops unlawfully killed 39 Afghan prisoners, farmers, and civilians. The report recommended 19 current and former soldiers face criminal investigation. Human Rights Watch's Australia director Daniela Gavshin said McBride's sentencing was evidence and Australia's whistleblowing laws needed exemptions in the public interest.
Devastating and ongoing flooding in southern Brazil is forcing some of the 500,000 displaced residents to consider uprooting their lives from inundated towns to rebuild on higher ground. 2 weeks after the onset of torrential rains, the Guaba River running by state capital Porto Alegre is rising again, having passed the all-time high. In the state of Rio Grande do Sul, the streets of dozens of towns have turned into slow-moving rivers. Just in the area around Porto Alegre, where 4 rivers converge to form the Guaba River, researchers estimate nearly 3,800 square kilometers were flooded.
That is more than the urban footprint of the Washington, D.C. metro area, which includes 10 counties in 2 adjacent states. With hundreds of thousands of families fleeing the floods, the disaster could touch off one of Brazil's biggest cases of climate migration in recent history. Southern Brazil's location at the confluence of tropical and polar currents has fed periods of increasingly intense drought and rains due to climate change, according to scientists. The record devastation in Rio Grande do Sul follows floods in the second half of last year, leading many of the 538,000 people now displaced from their homes to consider more extreme adaptations. Environmental experts warn that there is no alternative for some towns in the state but to relocate entire neighborhoods.
Britain's King Charles III unveiled a new portrait of himself at Buckingham Palace Tuesday. The portrait, painted by British artist Jonathan Yao, is the first official portrait of the king to be completed since his coronation, according to the royal family's X account. In a video, Charles pulled a black covering, unveiling the large red portrait alongside Yao. The King, 75, is wearing a Welsh Guards uniform in the piece and holding a sword. A butterfly hovers over his shoulder. In a statement shared by the royal family, Yao said he started working on the portrait when the king was still the Prince of Wales, and that it evolved as the subject's role in our public life has transformed.
I do my best to capture the life experiences and humanity etched into any individual sitter's face, and I hope that is what I have achieved in this portrait, Yao said. To try and capture that for His Majesty the King, who occupies such a unique role, was both a tremendous professional challenge, and one which I thoroughly enjoyed and am immensely grateful for. This isn't the first portrait Yao has worked on for the royal family. Yao completed paintings of Charles's father, the Duke of Edinburgh, in 2008, and his wife, Camilla, the then Duchess of Cornwall, in 2014. The portrait of Charles will eventually be exhibited in Draper's Hall in London. The unveiling of the portrait comes 2 weeks after Charles returned to public duties following his cancer diagnosis a little over 3 months ago. Last month, Buckingham Palace said that the King's medical team is very encouraged by the progress of his recovery but did not disclose any further details.
The answer for yesterday is B, allegedly. Police were hunting for a gang who had allegedly stolen 55 cars. Did you answer correctly? Now let's delve into the news of ongoing Brazil floods raise specter of climate migration. Number 1, uproot. 是离开家园或熟悉的地方. We decided to uproot and head for Scotland. Number 2, converge. 人或车辆汇集、聚集、集中. Thousands of supporters converged on London for the rally. Number 3, onset. 开端、发生、肇始、有指不愉快的事件. Most of the passes have been closed with the onset of winter. Next, we have a multiple choice question for everyone to practice. Which answer would you choose? You can write your answer in the comments section. The correct answer will be announced tomorrow. And that's all for today's Funday News. Be sure to tune into Funday News from Monday to Friday and click the link below to join Funday for free. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I'll see you next time.